Hello, welcome. I'm lisamharrison, and today I'm being joined by Richard Presser, the author of The Coming Golden Age. And welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Lisa. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. I have read your book, The Coming Golden Age, and I really wanted to congratulate you on it because I felt it did a very good job in bringing together all of the different subjects and sciences and different topics that give weight to the idea that we are in very extraordinary times. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
And before we get into the details of what 2012 is about, the times that we're in leading up to it, and what Ascension is, I was just wanting to briefly go over your own personal story of your own personal awakening, because I know from experience and from a multitude of people that are around me right now, when you're going through these initial stages of a growth in consciousness, an expansion in consciousness, it can be a very scary time because the world doesn't make sense anymore. Your life doesn't make sense anymore. Relationships break down. People around you, family and friends, can think you're losing your mind. You think you're losing your mind. And there's a lot of people I know are right there right now. And I think it would be a very reassuring and very relatable story to hear yours, because that's what I found when I was reading your book.
Thank you. Well, all that you listed I can identify with.
Yep.
My background is I'm an engineer, although I haven't fired that in anger. I have a PhD in engineering, though my work career was essentially in the IT industry, and worked for IBM for a number of years, and then joined a couple of other guys with an interesting little business, which we grew very rapidly to about a $25 million business and employing lots of really good people. And that I got involved in about 85. And then by about 91, I was owning half of that business and running it. And I was standing in front of the whiteboard in my office one day, and a lot of people, I guess, viewed where I was as being where they would like to be. I was married to an attractive lady, had 3 gorgeous kids. I was driving a Ferrari and had all the trappings of success, if you will. And I was standing in front of the whiteboard in my office, and it's like this double whammy hit me. The first aspect of it was that I realized that there was a hole inside of me, and the second aspect of it was that I wasn't filling it with all that I'd been creating in my life. And so I realized that all these elements of success meant nothing when it came to generating a sense of fulfillment, if you will. And I had no clue what that meant at that point. The notion of spirituality was not a word that was in my lexicon anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so that started a journey, I guess, which led to me essentially deconstructing my life as it existed. It took me a couple of years before I sold that business, and took a little longer for me to destroy my marriage and blow up the money I'd made. So I managed to lose a bit over $1 million in a year, which is a good going.
Mm-hmm. Nicely done.
And finished up in a little yoga cult for some years, trying to figure out which way was up. And so I realized in hindsight that perhaps close to 12 years of my life was spent on a journey that forced me to work from my intuitive side, because anything that I tried to plan in the way that I'd planned before simply turned to sand in my hand, which was pretty frustrating after having built a very successful business.
Mm.
So I realized that in hindsight, I realized I'd put together this plan that forced me to work from my intuitive side. The only thing that worked for me was my intuition. And so that, if you like, following those threads, a couple of years ago had me connect up with Carolyn Evers, who I now work very closely with, and we found that we have spent many, many past lives together. I guess would be the simplest way to answer that. And so here I find myself slapping in the middle of all that seems to be going on in relation to 2012, doing things I would, if you told me 3 or 4 years ago I'd be doing these things, I'd tell you you're stark raving crazy. But here we are. As I said, I find myself in the thick of things in relation to 2012. I find myself able to communicate with beings on the other side at will, not just beings on the other side, but the elementals. And Carolyn and I have been working with a couple of crystals recently, one in the UK that started communicating with us yesterday. I mean, you've got no idea what this journey is like when you start to open it up. So it's been an amazing journey, and a lot of personal difficulty and challenge along the way, and all of the things that you spoke about. You know, most of the people that used to be close to me think I'm stark raving mad, and that hasn't changed one bit, I might say, including all of my relatives.
I can relate.
And so yeah, it's very much part of this journey, and one of the great challenges really is you feel drawn to try and persuade them of the truth of what you know, and that's the last thing they want to hear from you. They think you're a nutcase to begin with, so when you start trying to persuade them, they think you're even crazier, and they want to shut the door properly. So it's a challenging path, and I know many people that have spoken to in the last couple of years have started to do some of that. So it's a challenging path.
It is a challenging path, and just to backtrack a little, it's so hard to justify these feelings of this void, this emptiness, this lack of fulfillment. The more successful you are by society's standards, you're being, people judge you as selfish, and why do you want more? How could you possibly want more? You've got more than other people, Stop being silly. And you feel like you need to justify this feeling, and it's really, really hard. You can't do it by society's standards, really.
Well, our world's not built on spirituality. That's the truth of the matter. It's built on a very different set of values and a sense of what's important. And, I as I said, I talk to people every day these days who are experiencing this crisis in one form or another. Most of them that I deal with have got past that initial crisis experience, but they just accept that the rest of the world accepts they're crazy, and they're waiting for the world to begin to wake up. And it really is like that. There are a lot of people awakening, as you have noticed, and there are these energies that have come to the planet that are beginning to awaken more and more people, and
well, I know myself.
So it's going to be a challenge for so many as this unfolds.
I mean, there are people who called me nuts 10 years ago who were starting to get back in touch and say, what was that what was that thing you were on about a couple of years back?
Yeah.
So when you first started, you went down, as you said, a yoga group, or yoga cult, I think was the word you used.
I discovered as a cult, yes.
Yeah, and I imagine it took you down a lot of different paths, looking at different modalities and different teachers. Were you tied up with particular gurus?
I tried lots of ways of clearing, I guess, the energies that I was feeling, because I didn't know what to do with them. In many ways, I didn't go down lots of guru paths. I fairly quickly found myself connected to this guy who ran that yoga group, which in the time I was involved morphed into what I described as a cult and then fell apart, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so what that was served me very well, both in terms of what I learnt, because I did learn a lot from it, but also its limitations and the limitations of the individual involved. So he would be the only individual that I would describe in any way as having served that, I suppose you call, guru role for me. There's been nobody else really beyond that. And one of the things I found as I walked my path is I'd find so many other people that would attend various kinds of trainings, I suppose, clearing events and so on, and I watched the impact that those events had on others, and they didn't touch me, and I thought, okay, what's wrong with me?